Keeping dietary fat really low when bulking will ensure that you limit the amount of fat that you gain. Hey everybody, I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. Again, this is one of these topics that people will try to argue against, but they don't really understand it. And where a lot of people mess it up is they mess up on the math end and they start thinking in terms of what Americans consider culturally and even dietarily to be a low-fat diet versus what I am talking about, which is extremely low-fat diets. So usually, like in the U.S., dietitians will say anything that is under 30% dietary fat is a low-fat diet. But what I would point out to people, if your diet is 20% fat and you're in a calorie surplus, trying to gain muscle, you're allowing actually for very significant amounts of fat gain. And the point is because the human body does not store protein ever. There's never been a documented case in the lab of successfully storing protein as body fat in a human. And carbohydrates are never stored subcutaneously. It's only viscerally. And we're talking in very, very trace amounts, right? We're talking very small amounts. Like for you to gain 2 pounds of fat in an entire year from carbohydrate storage would be difficult to achieve. Like that would be on the more extreme end, just so that we have a context for that. So what we're looking at is our dietary fat, and keeping in mind not all fats store equally either. But humans only store fat. So people say, well, I ate a fairly low-fat diet and I still gained body fat while overeating. I'm like, but how low fat did you go? Because they're thinking, well, 60 grams a day. Well, let's assume you're in a large calorie surplus and you gained some body weight and you ate 60 grams of fat a day. That's still considered to be a fairly low-fat diet, but it's not really, not globally. There are cultures where 15 to 20 grams of fat a day is the norm, and these are thriving cultures with healthy populations. So put that into perspective, because 60 grams, let's assume you stored all of it as fat. Now you won't, but at least this is what your potential is. So 60 grams a day times 30, I'm doing the math, 1,800 grams. Okay, that's like up to almost 4 pounds. Well, yeah, if you did that, you could hypothetically do that. But what happens if you only ate 20 grams a day? Now, people are going to say, how hard is that? It is easy to eat 20 grams of fat on a 4,000 calorie diet. It's extremely easy. Just don't eat foods with fat in them. Okay? If chicken breast is the fattest thing you eat, this is absurdly easy. Realistically. So even let's go 25 grams. Because there's going to be, if you're doing brown rice instead of white rice, okay, there's a little bit of fat in there. Right? There's a few grams. Not a lot. You're doing oats. All right, there's a little bit. But even 25 times 30, now we're down to 750 grams. That's just over a pound and a half. That would be the most fat you could gain in a month. The most, keeping in mind polyunsaturated fats don't store as efficiently as saturated. But you see where I'm going, guys. If you ate 60 grams of saturated fat a day, that can store much more efficiently. All right, you could easily gain 3 pounds of fat in a month in a large surplus. Okay, but keeping in mind dietary fat is just not that anabolic either in terms of muscle tissue, whereas in carbohydrate absolutely is due to the insulin response, training fuel, just overall energy turnover. So what I'm pointing out here is that your calorie intakes, your total net calorie intakes can be higher if you are replacing all those fat calories with either protein or carbohydrate. Okay. Because number one, they don't store as body fat. The excesses get burned off as body heat easier. And they produce anabolic hormones that help with muscle growth, things like insulin. And keep in mind, when we're talking about high insulin levels being a problem, we're talking about in a metabolically unhealthy person. A person who trains hard and isn't insulin resistant, okay? We produce much lower amounts of insulin, and every drop of it that we produce is potential muscle growth. So when we start looking at that, people should realize that if you're doing 25 grams of fat a day, keeping in mind mathematically, if you stored every last bit of it, every last tiny drop, and I got that wrong on the 3 pounds, it's something like, again, 1.5 pounds. pound and a half. That would be the most, no matter how many calories. I want to be clear on that. When you look at how small de novo lipogenesis is, the storage of carbohydrates, you would not be able to gain 2 pounds of fat per month, even if you added 2,000 calories a day, because your total energy turnover, your NEAT, your thermic effect, all of this stuff would simply go up to accommodate the carbohydrate. That would mean that if you ate this way in an entire year without cutting, what are you looking at? At most, about 15 pounds of fat in a year. You know how easy you could burn that off? And again, that's again extreme. You're probably not going to be able to gain that much because you're not going to store that efficiently. But that's what I mean. And the reality is people who eat this way, even when they're trying to eat in a surplus, may not gain any fat at all. All right? Keeping in mind, it's harder to go into a surplus there. That surplus is very different. In many cases, someone doing 25 grams of fat a day, making sure some of that is essential. Because keep in mind, the only essential fats you need are the polyunsaturated ones. And we don't need large amounts of those. You know, when people point out, well, you know, we can develop deficiencies from really low-fat diets. Well, only those. And those deficiencies are extremely rare. And notice they don't exist in countries and societies that only eat 20 grams a day. These problems don't seem to exist in them. These are hypotheticals. These are hypotheticals. Again, very, very unlikely. Especially if you're eating a balanced diet. Because again, the same thing, we could talk about absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. Okay, but when your diet is 4,000 calories of healthy, clean food, and you're getting all these vitamins and minerals, your absorption can be lower, and you're still going to be optimal. All right? And this has worked. Think how many bodybuilders in the past got jacked and lean on chicken and rice diets. Tons. This is time proven. It's not like this is some hypothetical nonsense that's never been done in the real world. All right? So when we talk about this, people are like, well, that's a nice theory, but does it work? How many Mr. Olympias ate that way? Historically, how many guys who competed at ultra high levels in bodybuilding or even fitness models ate this way successfully for the past 40 years? A lot of them. So are we going to pretend this hasn't been tested in the real world? It has. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative. And I will talk to you guys and gals next time.